I knew something was wrong the moment Hank didn't come running. He always meets me at the door. Every night, no exceptions. 7 years of it. That dog has never once let me down. But that Tuesday night, I pushed the side door open, and the house was quiet, and the kitchen light was on, and the living room light was on, and the upstairs hall light was on, and no Hank. I found him in the corner of the kitchen, pressed against the cabinet, tail moving low and slow. He knew. Dogs always know before people do. Donna was in the kitchen doorway. I still had chalk on my hands. I'd come straight from the arena, late session, working the ropes with a kid who needed to learn how to fall. Donna had her work clothes on, but her hair had gone flat and her mascara had done some traveling. And I could see from the way she was standing that she had been building to this for a while. Hours, maybe. Maybe longer. I set my bag down. "You are never here, Ray," she said. "Even when you're standing right in front of me, you are somewhere else. I deserve more than this." I let her finish. That's a thing I learned in the ring a long time ago. You don't cover up in the first 10 seconds. You let the other man show you everything he's got, every combination, every angle. You absorb it, and you wait, and you see what's real and what's performance. She kept going, 15 minutes maybe. The work, the travel, the evenings, the way I didn't talk about things, the way I was always inside my own head, the way she felt like a roommate and not a wife. She wasn't wrong about all of it. When she was done, I said, "You done? Okay, good night." I went upstairs. I passed Kayla's door. She was home for the week, between semesters. The light under the door was on. It went off while I was standing there. She was awake. She heard the whole thing. She didn't come out. That cost me more than anything Donna said. I lay in the dark in the spare room that night and let it settle. That's when I understood. Not the marriage, exactly. The pretense of the marriage. The construction. The thing we had been maintaining between us with habit and furniture and the occasional dinner out. The way you keep a car running longer than it should because you don't want to deal with the paperwork. And that's not where this story starts. But it's where I need to place the marker so you understand what came next. Because 3 days before Valentine's Day, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, calm as a closing statement, "I'm having doubts about us. Maybe we should take a break." I looked at her. She had her coffee cup in both hands, professional expression, the same face she used for client presentations. I said, "Take all the time you need." She blinked. I don't think that was the answer she expected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot of ground between that August night and February. 3 weeks after the kitchen argument, I was at the arena taping my hands before a card when my phone buzzed on the bench beside me. I glanced at it. Pam Geary's Instagram feed. Pam was Donna's best friend, had been for 15 years. I was still following both of them out of nothing more than habit. The photo was soft-lit, casual. A table at some lakeside lodge, wine glasses, candles. Donna and Dale Fuchs. Dale Fuchs lived 2 houses down. He had replaced our gutters 3 years back. Nice enough guy, tan in the way of men who work outside, always had a story. Donna had mentioned him 4 or 5 times over the last year and a half. All of it reasonable and unremarkable. He had his arm around her. They were both soft with wine and with each other. And the geolocation on the photo was a lodge up near Pymatuning. That was a Saturday. Donna had told me she was visiting her sister in Knoxville. Her sister lives in Knoxville. "Well," I said out loud, "there it is." I took a screenshot, closed the app, put the phone in my bag, walked to the bench press and worked until my hands were shaking and my jaw ached, and I couldn't think about anything but the weight. Benny Marsh, my tag partner, was across the room doing cable work. He was 28 and had good instincts. He watched me for a while and then he looked away and didn't say a word. He's going to be a good trainer someday. I drove home in the F-150. Dark blue, 2019, 112,000 miles on it. I pulled into the garage and shut the engine off and sat there. The garage was dark and the engine was ticking, and I could see the side door of the house through the windshield. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough. I put my hands on the steering wheel and looked at the ceiling and felt the thing I was going to have to feel if I was going to get through the rest of this with any kind of clarity. I let it come. It was exactly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I looked at the roof of the cab for another minute, then I got out. Hank was waiting at the door. I crouched down in the doorway and scratched behind his ears and let him push his big head against my chest and stayed there longer than I needed to. He didn't ask any questions. That's the thing about dogs, they don't need you to explain it. "Hey, buddy," I said. He wagged his whole back half. I went to the arena the next morning before anyone else got there. I had a spare locker in the far corridor, left over from when the building had more roster. I pulled it open and got a manila folder out of the office supply shelf, wrote the date on the tab, printed the screenshot at the FedEx on Route 20, and put it inside. The folder was thin. It wouldn't stay that way. I put the folder in the spare locker, spun the combination, and walked back out onto the arena floor. The canvas was still set up from the night before. I climbed in, stood in the middle of it, and looked at the lights. I had been punched in the face in this ring for 22 years. I knew how to take a hit. What I was still learning was how to throw one. The thing about building a folder is patience. Not passion, not anger, patience. You make one entry at a time. You date it. You keep it factual. You don't editorialize. I had learned this not from a lawyer or a detective show, but from 22 years of studying tape. You watch the film, you write down what you see, not what you feel about it. The feeling is for later. I used a notebook. A legal pad, actually. Same kind I've been using since forever. Bought in a 4-pack at the dollar store. I printed things at the FedEx on Route 20. I logged mileage the old way. In a small spiral notebook I kept in the glove box of the truck. No apps, no hacks, nothing that required a password or a subscription or a set of skills I didn't have. Just eyes and dates and a working memory. What I had were patterns. Dale's truck in our driveway. White Ram 1500, tool racks on the bed. I started noting when it was there. Tuesdays mostly. Some Saturdays. He had a plausible reason every time if you needed one. He'd done work on our place before. You could explain it all away. I didn't explain it away. Benny Marsh covered for me once. Maybe 6 weeks into this. A promoter called the arena looking for me during a window when I was in the FedEx parking lot running copies. Benny told him I was doing a media call and would phone back in 20 minutes. I came back to find Benny eating a sandwich and reading a wrestling sheet. "You good, Ray?" he said. "Working on something," I said. "Okay," he said and turned the page. That was the whole conversation. In February, I drove out to Cutter's Ridge. Snow on Route 7 past Andover. Just a dusting, but enough to make the road lonely. Eddie Boone's place was off a gravel road that didn't get plowed until the county got around to it, which was usually Tuesday if you were lucky, and Thursday if you weren't. I'd known Eddie for 26 years. He was my trainer before I was his. Back when I was 26 and thought I knew everything. And he was 42 and knew I didn't. He retired from the arena 8 years back. He had a cabin at Cutter's Ridge, near the Pymatuning State Park area, wood stove, a dock over black water, a border collie named Cisco that he didn't talk about much. He lived alone. He drank Maker's Mark moderately and thought carefully and never told you what to do. He opened the door before I knocked. "Figured you'd come," he said. I sat at his kitchen table and told him everything. 3 years of it, or what I could reconstruct. The distance, the argument, the photo, the pattern of dates and trucks and late nights. The 2 men I now had names for and dates for, and, in one case, a hotel receipt that had come my way through a channel I hadn't expected. Eddie listened without interrupting. He had his hands flat on the table. The wood stove was going and the dock outside was groaning over the black water, and the cabin smelled like wood smoke and old wool. When I was done, he poured 2 fingers of Maker's Mark and slid 1 glass across the table to me. He didn't touch his own. "The only thing you owe that woman," he said, "is exactly what she gave you." I asked what that meant in practical terms. He looked at the table for a moment. "Don't move until you can't lose," he said. 6 words. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I wrote it on a Post-it that night when I got home, stuck it inside my locker at the arena, up on the metal shelf where I kept my hand tape and my aspirin, and a photograph of Kayla from her graduation. I looked at it every day for the next 3 months. The second development came through a woman named Terry Vance. She worked at Kellerman and Associates, Donna's firm, 9 years in admin. 2 years back, her son had gotten himself into a bad situation, with a car loan, one of those dealerships that works hard to bury people who don't know better, and I'd helped her navigate it. Not legally, just practically. Made some calls. Knew a guy who knew a guy at the dealer's lending arm. Got the kid out of the agreement without it destroying his credit. Terry had never forgotten it. She forwarded me 2 hotel receipts, corporate card, Kellerman and Associates account. The name on the authorizing line was Roy Gaines. Managing partner, 14 years. The kind of man who shakes your hand at his own party and looks you right in the eye. The receipts were dated. I put them in the folder under a second tab. I used a sticky divider I'd bought at the office supply place, the kind you'd use for a school project. Bright blue. I wrote Gaines on it in ballpoint pen. Dale Fuchs, who replaced my gutters, was one problem. Roy Gaines, who ran the firm my wife worked at, was a different kind of problem altogether. I drove home from the FedEx that afternoon on a gray November day. The lake was the color of old pewter through the windshield, the kind of gray that Ohio saves for November, as if the rest of the year was just practice. I felt, for the first time in months, like a man with a plan instead of a man with a problem. There's a very specific difference between those two things, and if you have ever been in the second position, you know exactly what I mean by the first. A week later, I had a card at the arena. I was in the ring with a younger guy, not Benny, a kid from Youngstown who was maybe 24, and had about 60% of the talent he thought he had, which put him roughly even with most of us. The match was laid out clean. I was doing the job, putting him over, which is the polite term for letting someone beat you in a way that makes them look good. He decided to shoot real heat. After the bell, while I was in the process of going down the way we'd agreed, he came in with an elbow that had bad intentions in it. Caught me across the jaw, right at the hinge. Not professional. Not the kind of mistake a tired guy makes. The deliberate kind. I went down on one knee. The crowd went quiet. Not the dramatic quiet of a good spot. The wrong kind of quiet, where people aren't sure what they're watching. I got up. I finished the match. I worked clean, took every bump we had planned, did the job the way it was laid out, because that's what a professional does. When the performance is wrong, you don't blow up the business to settle a personal score. You finish the work. But in the corridor afterward, the kid made a comment about it. Something smart. Something in the register of a guy who thinks he got away with something and can't help proving it. I grabbed him by the collar, walked him backward into the cinder block wall. 2 steps. Not fast, not rough. I held him there and looked at him and said one sentence in a voice that didn't go up at the end. You do that again, and I'll end your career without leaving a mark. I let go. I walked away. He didn't say another word. Not that night, not any night after it. The folder had 2 tabs now. Dale Fuchs, who replaced my gutters 3 years ago and apparently thought that entitled him to something else. And Roy Gaines, who shook my hand at his own Christmas party and told me I was a lucky man. I kept thinking about that. The audacity of it. The absolute brass of standing in a room full of people and looking a man in the eye and lying. I'd been in the ring with bad actors my whole career. At least they had the decency to do it in front of a crowd. The Kellerman and Associates Christmas party was at a rented hall downtown, the kind of venue with a temporary bar and lighting they dimmed to hide the dropped ceiling. Donna had a new dress, dark green, and she looked good in it. I wore the one suit jacket I own that still fits correctly. Roy Gaines found me within the first 10 minutes. He was the kind of man who worked a room. Good shoes, firm handshake, the practiced ease of someone who had monetized being charming. He shook my hand and held it just a half beat too long, the way power brokers do. You've got a hell of a woman there, Ray, he said. I looked at him. I smiled the smile I use when I'm being paid to smile, which is a real smile, technically. It reaches my eyes. I've been performing it for 22 years. I know exactly what I've got, Roy, I said. He laughed. He moved on to the next handshake. Donna looked at me from across the room. Half a second, maybe less. Then she turned back to her conversation. I got a club soda from the bar and stood near the window and watched the room. On the drive home, she started. What was that supposed to mean? She said. What you said to Roy. I said I know what I've got. That's a compliment. It didn't sound like a compliment. Donna, I'm tired. Let's not. Don't tell me let's not when you're clearly... I'm tired, I said. It was a long week. She threw her clutch onto the back seat, It hit the window with a sharp crack. She crossed her arms and looked out the passenger window. I kept driving. I didn't speed up or slow down. I kept the same pressure on the gas pedal I'd been using since we left the lot. When you get angrier, I get quieter. That's not a strategy. It's just what happens. It's how I'm built. I don't know if it makes things better or worse, but it's the only gear I have. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. A week before Christmas, Donna told me she was working late. I drove past the Kellerman parking garage at 9:40 in the evening. Her Camry was in the second level. Roy Gaines's black Lexus was 3 spots down. I didn't stop. I noted the time in my notebook and drove home. Made myself a cup of gas station coffee I'd grabbed on the way and sat at the kitchen table with Hank's chin on my knee. Dale was proximity, I said to nobody in particular. Roy Gaines was ambition. Those are 2 different problems. Hank blinked. Walt Dillon came to a card at the arena 2 weeks before Christmas. Walt was a mutual friend, had been for years. He owned an electrical contracting company. Good man, the kind who could sit on a fence for a long time without picking a side and mistake that for wisdom. He sat ringside and watched me work. Afterward, in the corridor, he found me. I didn't know how bad it was, he said. Nobody did, I said. That was the point. He looked like he wanted to say something else. I handed him a sealed envelope. 3 pages inside, the ones I thought he needed to see. Not everything, not the hotel receipts, just enough. He didn't open it there. He put it in his jacket pocket and nodded and left. He called Donna 3 days later and told her he wouldn't be coming to her birthday dinner in February. Walt had been to every one of her birthday dinners for a decade. She called me immediately. Did you say something to Walt? I had a conversation with Walt, I said. About what? About things I know. Long silence. Ray, good night, Donna. I put Walt's name in my phone under a new contact entry. I called it solid. It's a wrestling term. Means somebody who won't let you down when the lights are on. One night after a card, I was walking to the truck in the arena lot when I spotted Dale Fuchs' Ram 1500 at the far end of the lot. He was moving toward the exit, moving faster than a man walks when he's comfortable. And when he clocked me coming, he broke into a near jog. I didn't run. I know that lot. Every corner, every row, the angle of every light, and the gap between every chain link section. I've been parking there for over 2 decades. I walked at a steady pace, cut the angle through the back row, and arrived at the driver's side door of his truck a full 10 seconds before he did. He stopped about 10 feet from me. He was breathing hard. You following me now, Ray? He said. You parked in my lot, Dale. I come to matches sometimes. I didn't realize. Go home, I said. He got in his truck. I stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets and watched the taillights all the way to the exit. My phone was in my jacket. Kayla called 40 seconds later. I picked up. Hey, she said. How was the card? Good, I said. Clean card. You sound tired. I'm fine, Kayla. A beat of silence the way she does when she isn't fully buying it. Okay, she said. I'll call Sunday. Sounds good. How's school? Good. History exam Friday, but I'm ready. You're always ready, I said. She laughed a little and said good night and hung up. I stood there in the dark lot for another minute. The February cold was working through my jacket. I thought about the sound of her laugh. Thought about what I was keeping from her by omission, which wasn't exactly lying, but was also not exactly not lying. I drove home and pulled off Route 20 at the gravel turnaround by the old grain elevator, the one that's been closed since before Kayla was born. I pulled over and got out. I kicked the passenger side rear tire 3 times. Hard. The kind of hard that you can feel from your foot to your hip. Then I leaned against the bed of the truck with both hands flat on the cold metal and breathed. I was angry at myself. Not at Donna, not at Dale, not at Roy Gaines with his good shoes and his firm handshake. At myself. For almost running after Dale in that parking lot. For almost becoming the guy who chases a contractor through a parking lot in the dark and turns into a story someone tells at a bar. For the 11 seconds I had wanted to. That's not who I was going to be. I stood there until I was certain of it. Then I got back in the truck. I never mentioned it to anyone. Carla Foss's office was in Jefferson, about 40 minutes south. She was a partner at Foss and Henley, 12 years in, the kind of attorney who kept the paperwork exact and the legal pad full and never told you what you wanted to hear when what you needed was something else. The coffee was always bad. I don't know if she made it bad on purpose or if bad coffee was just part of the aesthetic of being efficient, but I had been in that office 6 times by March, and the coffee had never once improved. She walked me through the Ridgeline structure on a Tuesday morning in early spring, while rain came sideways off the lake and streaked the window behind her desk. Ridgeline Fitness Consulting, she said. Registered in Geauga County, 40 minutes east. Registered agent is my office. Every pay-per-view appearance fee, every merchandise cut, every signing bonus from this point forward goes into that LLC. Documented? Clean as anything I've ever filed, she said. Every dollar has a receipt and a purpose. Consulting fees for training, licensing, above board, end to end. So, the marital estate stops growing as of the date you filed. The joint account stays where it is. She keeps spending from it, which she is, by the way. The tide went out, and she doesn't know it yet. She's building her case on a foundation you've already moved, I said, remembering how she'd phrased it the first time. She'll know the old numbers, Carla said. Which is the same as knowing nothing. She took a sip of the bad coffee and looked at her legal pad. I want to raise the Roy Gaines angle, she said. What about it? I have a contact at the Ohio Bar's professional conduct office. The hotel receipts, the dates, the pattern of behavior with a direct report, that's a reportable situation. It would end his partnership, possibly end her position at the firm. I sat with that for about 2 seconds. Pull it back, I said. She looked up. You sure? The financial structure is enough. The truth in a deposition is enough. Some moves you don't make not because you can't, but because you'd have to live with them. She looked at me for a moment. Then she wrote something on her legal pad. Didn't tell me what. Okay, she said. We do it clean. She clicked her pen. That was the end of that. In late March, I got a call from a promotional agency out of Columbus. They were putting together a sports media weekend in Nashville, a fan event, autograph tables, panel appearances. They wanted me as part of a veteran wrestlers segment. The money was modest, but the airfare was covered and I hadn't been outside my own zip code in over 3 years. I went. Nashville was warm in a way that felt almost aggressive after an Ohio winter. The event was at a convention center downtown, and it smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee, and the particular organized chaos of a well-run fan event. I signed for 3 hours, talked with a few hundred people, did a panel that went fine. At the reception that evening, I met Miranda Voss. She was a freelance photographer, worked sports and editorial, based in Nashville. She had a camera around her neck, and I noticed that while we were talking, she never once lifted it, which is a thing I noticed because most photographers can't help photographing things even when the situation doesn't call for it. She asked me the usual things first. How long had I been in the business? How was the event? All the social glue questions. Then she asked me something nobody in Ashtabula had thought to ask me in about 2 years. What are you for? She said. Not what you've been through. What are you actually for? I looked at her. She was looking back, not waiting for the answer she'd expected, just waiting. I'm for, I said, and stopped, because I was going to say the ring and realized that wasn't quite right, and I was going to say my daughter and realized that was right, but incomplete. I'm for doing things the right way when it would be easier not to, I said, and for the long game. I believe in the long game. She nodded like that was a real answer. We talked for about 40 minutes. She'd been through a divorce herself, 3 years back, and she talked about it the way people talk about something they've fully processed, without performance of recovery, and without bitterness, just as a thing that happened, and a thing she'd worked through, and a thing she'd learned from. I asked her how she got through the middle part, the part where you don't know yet how it ends. I stopped trying to control the outcome, she said. I just controlled the quality of my own actions. Every day. That's actually enough. She said it plainly, like it was obvious. And maybe it was, but I hadn't heard anyone say it that plainly before. We said goodnight outside the reception hall. She shook my hand, the good kind of handshake, firm and brief, looked me in the eye and said, "Good luck with the long game." I drove back to the hotel thinking about that. I flew home the next morning. Ohio came up below me through the clouds, flat and green and gray and endlessly familiar. And I put my forehead against the cold oval of the window and let myself feel something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Not hope exactly, more like certainty. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. I drove home from the airport in the truck and Hank met me at the door, and I crouched down and let him knock me half off my feet with his head. "Hey, buddy." I was back on the clock. I drove out to Eddie's place at Cutter's Ridge the following Saturday. The February ice was starting to pull back from the dock by then, the edges going gray and soft. We sat on the dock in the late afternoon, two lawn chairs Eddie had dragged out, Maker's Mark and small glasses that fogged in the cold. "You talked to your attorney?" Eddie said. "4 times," I said. "Everything's filed." "And the daughter?" I looked at the water. "Not yet. She's going to find out one way or another," he said. "I know. Better it comes from you." "I know, Eddie." He nodded and didn't push it. That was the thing about Eddie. He'd tell you what needed telling, and then he'd let you carry it. We sat there for a while without talking. The ice cracked somewhere out on the lake and the sound carried a long way in the cold air. "You're doing it right," he said finally. "Tell me that again in about 6 months," I said. He almost smiled. For Eddie, that was a standing ovation. I drove home in the dark. The lake was on my left for most of the drive, black and flat, and the lights of the far shore were small and cold and very far away. I had been in that ring for 22 years. I had been hit, dropped, bloodied, embarrassed. I had lost matches I should have won and won matches I should have lost, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I had learned the only thing worth knowing. The outcome is in the preparation. What you do when nobody's watching is what decides the thing. I had a folder. I had a structure. I had a lawyer and a mentor, and a friend who'd been quietly moved from one side of the ledger to the other. Now I needed Pam Geary. Pam was Donna's best friend and Donna's alibi runner. Had been for years. Her husband, Gary, owned the insurance agency with her, had for 9 years, and Gary was the kind of man I understood completely. Quiet, steady, absorbed things without making a scene. But pride ran deep in him, the kind that goes down to the floor joists. I drove to their house on a Saturday afternoon in early April. Gary's Silverado was in the drive. I knocked. Gary answered. He had a coffee cup in one hand and the look of a man whose Saturday was going fine until the door opened. "Ray," he said. "Gary," I said. "You got a few minutes?" He did. We sat at his kitchen table. No Pam, she was out somewhere, which was the way I'd planned it. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Not the whole folder, a selection, enough. He opened it, he read it. He didn't say anything for a while. "How long have you known?" he said finally. "Since August," I said. "I wanted to know the full shape of it before I moved." He nodded. He was looking at the table, not at me. "Pam's been covering for her," I said. "The Knoxville story, at least 2 others. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just thought you should know what your agency's name has been attached to." That last part landed where I intended it to. Gary looked up at me. "What are you going to do?" he said. "What I have to," I said. "Legally. Cleanly." He nodded again. He folded the papers back into the envelope and set it on the table with his hands on top of it. "You're a decent man, Ray," he said. "I'm working on it," I said. I drove home. That Monday morning, Pam called Donna in a panic. Donna called me 40 minutes later, voice tight, the way it gets when she's trying to control something she can feel slipping. "We need to talk," she said. "We will," I said, "through the attorneys." Silence. "What do you mean, through the—" "I filed last Friday," I said. "Carla Foss and Jefferson. You'll hear from her by end of week." Another silence. Longer this time. "Ray." "You'll be fine, Donna," I said. "You're resourceful." I hung up. 3 days before Valentine's Day, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, calm as a closing statement, "I'm having doubts about us. Maybe we should take a break." I looked at her for a moment. I had already spoken to Carla twice that week. The Ridgeline documentation was complete. The deposition date was set for March. The folder was in Carla's filing cabinet. 3 inches thick, tabbed and indexed. Take all the time you need, I said. She looked at me. She was reading me, trying to find the injury, the crack, the place where a man who loves you bleeds when you say a thing like that to his face. She didn't find it. I wasn't cold. That's not what this was. I had already done the bleeding, in a truck in a dark garage, in a gravel turnaround on Route 20, at Eddie's dock with a glass of Maker's Mark in my hand. I had felt the full weight of it and set it down and walked forward. She was expecting a man who hadn't done that work yet. That's all you have to say, she said. That's all I have to say, I said. She stood up and left the kitchen. I heard her upstairs. I heard her on the phone, voice low, door closed. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. Sweetheart, she said. Hey, Mom, I said. You busy Valentine's Day? A pause. What did she do? My mom said. Ruth Kowalski was 74 years old, a former school secretary at Jefferson Elementary, 28 years. She had known something was wrong for 2 years, she told me later. She had waited to be asked. I made a reservation at Crestview Grill, I said. The good place, white tablecloths. You want to go to dinner with me? Raymond, she said. Yeah? I am going to wear my good earrings, she said. I laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, out loud, the kind that surprised me a little. Wear whatever you want, I said. I'll pick you up at 6. I hung up and took out my phone. I went to Instagram and I unfollowed Donna. I went to Facebook and unfollowed her there too. I went to the restaurant's confirmation email and changed the reservation to 2. Then I texted Donna. I'll be out Valentine's evening. Don't wait up. She replied in 40 seconds. Where are you going? I put the phone down. The night before Valentine's Day, Donna came home from work and tried again. She found me in the living room with Hank, watching film on a kid I was going to be working with the following week. I want to talk, she said. Okay, I said. I didn't turn the film off. Can you turn that off? I turned it off. I looked at her. I think I said it wrong the other day, she said. The break thing. I was stressed and I overstated it. Okay, I said. I don't want to break. I want us to work on things. I looked at her for a moment. She had her arms crossed, but not angry crossed. Nervous crossed. Her weight shifted to her left foot, the way it did when she was uncertain about something. What things? I said. Communication, time together, you being present when you're home. Right. Ray, I'm trying here. I hear you, I said. I picked up the remote. You want to watch something? She stared at me. That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Donna? That you're going to try. That this matters to you. It matters to me. You don't act like it. I set the remote down. I work 60 hours a week at that arena. I have for 22 years. The mortgage is paid. Kayla's scholarship is topped up. The heat works. I don't know what else you want me to demonstrate. She uncrossed her arms, recrossed them. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Then tell me what you mean. She didn't. She stood there for another 10 seconds, then walked upstairs. I sat in the dark living room for a while. Hank came and put his head in my lap. I scratched his ears and watched the blank television screen. That was November. By December, she had stopped trying to have the conversation. By January, she had stopped pretending to want to. And then it was February, and the lake was frozen solid out past the break wall, and the house was the quietest it had been in years. 3 days before Valentine's Day, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, calm as a closing statement, I'm having doubts about us. Maybe we should take a break. I looked at her. She had her coffee cup in both hands. She was looking at the table, not at me. Take all the time you need, I said. She looked up then. I think she expected something else. An argument, a plea, some kind of reaction she could work with. I got up, rinsed my coffee cup, and went upstairs to get ready for work. That afternoon, I unfollowed her on everything. Instagram, Facebook, the shared photo account we'd set up when Kayla started college. I did it quietly, the way you close a door when someone's sleeping. No announcement, no dramatic gesture, just gone. I called Crestview Grill and changed the Valentine's reservation from 2 to 2. Same table, different guest. Then I called my mother. Mom, I said, you want to go to dinner Saturday? Ruth Kowalski was quiet for a second. Crestview? Yeah. Ray. Her voice did something careful. Is everything okay? It will be, I said. You want to go or not? I'll wear the blue dress, she said. I laughed. First real laugh in about 3 weeks. Wear whatever you want, Mom. I'm wearing the blue dress. Pick me up at 6. That was that. The night of the 14th, I picked her up at her place on Prospect Street. She came out before I even got to the door. Blue dress, the good coat, her hair done. She looked like she'd been ready for an hour. You look nice, I said. I know, she said. She patted my arm and got in the truck. We had the corner table at Crestview. White tablecloth, candle in the middle, the whole thing. My mother ordered the walleye and a glass of white wine and told me 3 stories about people from her school secretary days that I'd never heard before, which at 74 years old is a genuine achievement. I ordered the ribeye and listened to every word. At some point, she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. You're doing the right thing, she said. I haven't done anything yet, I said. I know, she said. That's what I mean. After dinner, I took a photo. My mother in her blue dress, candlelight, that small smile she has that she passed on to Kayla. I posted it on Instagram with the caption, Best date I've ever had. I put my phone face down on the table and had dessert. By the time I dropped my mother off and drove home, the notifications had started. I sat in the driveway and looked at the screen. Donna had texted 32 times that night. The first few were casual. Hey, how are you? Then confused. Did you unfollow me? Then something sharper. Ray, what is this photo? Then a long stretch of messages I didn't read in order, just scrolled past, watching the tone escalate like a fever chart. By message 20-something, she was asking me to call her. By the last few, she was asking where I was. I put the phone in my jacket pocket and went inside. Hank met me at the door. I crouched down and gave him a good long scratch behind the ears. He wagged his whole back half the way he always did, like I'd been gone a year instead of 4 hours. Hey, buddy, I said. Good boy. I got a glass of water and went to bed. I did not call her back that night. I did not call her back the next morning either. She showed up at the house at 10 a.m. on Sunday. I was in the garage, going through some old gear, when I heard her car in the drive. I didn't go out. She came around through the side door. Ray. Donna. She looked at me. She was in her good coat again, hair done, which meant she'd prepared for this. Donna always prepared. What is going on? She said. Nothing's going on, I said. I went back to the gear bag I was sorting. You unfollowed me on everything. You posted that photo. You didn't answer my texts. I was at dinner, I said, with my mother. I know you were at dinner with your mother. That's not the point. What is the point, Donna? She stepped further into the garage. The point is you're acting like this is over. I set down the gear bag. I looked at her. Isn't it? I said. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I said I had doubts. That doesn't mean it's over. You said you wanted a break. I was stressed. I told you that. You did, I said, and I gave you what you asked for. I took you at your word. That's not a crime. Ray, you can't just... She stopped. She was trying to find the right angle and couldn't locate it. This isn't how adults handle things. How do adults handle things, Donna? She didn't answer that. I picked up the gear bag again. I've got things to do today. If you want to talk, call Carla Foss. She's handling my side of things. The silence that followed that sentence was the best silence I'd had in months. Donna's face went through something, not dramatic, just a slow understanding, the kind that settles in rather than hits. You have a lawyer, she said. It wasn't a question. I do, I said. How long? Long enough? She stood there for another moment. Then she walked back out through the side door. I heard her car start. I heard it back out of the drive. I went back to sorting the gear. Hank wandered in from the yard and sat next to me. Yeah, I said to him. Me too. That was mid-February. The next 3 weeks were the machinery part. The part that isn't dramatic. Just paperwork and phone calls and Carla's dry voice on the other end of the line telling me what to sign and when. Donna hired a lawyer named Phil Sutter out of Conneaut. Phil Sutter had a website with his photo on it and the phrase aggressive advocacy in the header, which Carla said meant he was expensive and loud, and usually effective against people who hadn't done their homework. "We've done our homework," she said. "I know," I said. "Her team is going to request financial disclosure. Full asset inventory." "Good," I said. Carla looked at me over the legal pad. "You're not worried about that." "I'm not worried about that," I said. She almost smiled. Carla Foss almost smiling was the equivalent of anyone else doing a backflip. Donna's team filed for the full disclosure in the first week of March. They expected to find the joint accounts, the house, the arena income, the usual inventory of a 23-year marriage. What they found was that Ray Kowalski's professional income for the past 18 months had been flowing into Ridgeline Fitness Consulting, a registered LLC in Geauga County. Documented clean, every transaction logged, every dollar accounted for, and legally deferred from the marital estate. The joint account showed what it always showed. The arena checks she thought she knew about had been redirected before she ever thought to look. Phil Sutter called Carla on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in her office drinking bad coffee when she took the call. She listened for about 90 seconds. She said. I understand his concern. She looked at me. I'll pass that along. She hung up. Phil Sutter is less confident than his website suggested, she said. I drank my bad coffee. He's going to push for a settlement conference, she said. Donna wants to talk. What do? We go to the conference, Carla said. We listen, we say very little. And we let her realize in real time that the foundation she was standing on isn't there anymore. I nodded. Ray, Carla said. She set down her pen. I want to be clear about something. The Ridgeline structure is clean, it's legal, it's documented. But in a settlement conference, her attorney is going to call it intentional concealment, and he's going to say it loud. Let him, I said. It's going to be uncomfortable. I've been hit in the face for 22 years, I said. I know how to stand in a room while someone yells at me. Carla picked her pen back up. Good, she said. That's exactly what this is. The settlement conference was set for the third week of March, Jefferson, Ohio. A conference room above a title company on Main Street, the kind of room that smells like carpet cleaner and old decisions. I drove up alone. Carla met me in the parking lot. Remember, she said, you don't talk unless I tell you to. Got it. If she cries, you look at the table. Got it. If Sutter raises his voice, you look at the table. I'm going to look at the table a lot, I said. Yes, she said, you are. We went in. Donna was already there with Phil Sutter. She was in a charcoal blazer I didn't recognize. New. She had her hands folded on the table in front of her, and she looked composed, which I knew was costing her something. Sutter was a big guy, mid-50s, the kind of broad that comes from good meals rather than the gym. He had a yellow legal pad and a fountain pen, and the specific confidence of a man who has not yet been surprised today. The mediator was a woman named Janet Kroll, gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, the practiced neutrality of someone who has seen every version of this room. We sat down. Janet Kroll explained the process. Sutter nodded. Carla nodded. I looked at the table. Sutter opened. He laid out Donna's position. 23-year marriage, shared assets, raised professional income, the house in Ashtabula, the joint accounts, standard. He had a number. It was a large number. He said it with the confidence of a man who has done his research. Carla let him finish. Then she opened her folder and slid a document across the table. Ridgeline Fitness Consulting, she said. Registered LLC, Geauga County. 18 months of documented professional income, legally deferred from the marital estate. All filings current. All documentation available for review. Sutter looked at the document. He looked at it for a long time. Donna looked at Carla. Then she looked at me. I looked at the table. Sutter said something about intentional concealment. Carla said something about legal LLC registration and documented business activity. They went back and forth for a while. I kept my eyes down. At one point, Donna said my name, just my name, Ray, in a tone I hadn't heard from her in years. Something underneath the composure. I looked at the table. Sutter's number got smaller. It got smaller again after lunch. By 3 in the afternoon, we have the outline of a settlement. The house would sell. The proceeds split, but not the way Donna had expected. The joint accounts divided. The Ridgeline assets stayed with Ridgeline, which meant they stayed with me. Donna signed the outline at 3:47. She didn't look at me when she signed it. She looked at the table. I thought about saying something. I didn't. We walked out to the parking lot separately. Carla and I stood by her car. That, Carla said, was 18 months of patience paying off. Yeah, I said, you did good in there. I looked at the table a lot. Exactly right, she said. She got in her car. I'll have the draft to you by Friday. I drove home on Route 20. The lake was visible for a stretch, gray and wide, and still carrying some ice along the edges, but not much. The February freeze was letting go. Slowly, the way things do up here, but letting go. I stopped at the lakeside bar in Geneva on the lake. It was a Tuesday afternoon and the place was quiet. Neon Bud sign in the window, two guys at the far end of the bar watching a game with the sound off. I sat on a stool that wobbled the same way it had probably wobbled since I was 30 years old, and ordered a Maker's Mark and a perch sandwich. The bartender, a woman named Connie, who had been working there as long as I could remember, set the drink down without being asked to pour a double, but she did anyway. Rough day? She said. No, I said. Actually not. She nodded and went back to her business. I ate my sandwich and drank my bourbon and watched the lake through the window. A couple of gulls working the parking lot. The water dark and flat and going on forever toward Canada. I thought about Kayla. I needed to call her. A real call, not the parking lot kind where I told her I was fine and she knew I wasn't. She was coming home for spring break in 3 weeks, and she was going to walk into a house that was in the process of being dismantled, and I owed her more than a parking lot call. I finished the sandwich, left Connie a good tip. I sat in the truck for a minute before I started it. Not the crying kind of sitting, just the quiet kind. The kind where you take stock of where you are and how you got there, and decide whether you're okay with it. I was okay with it. I started the truck and drove home. That night, I called Kayla from the kitchen. Hank was asleep in front of the stove. Outside, the wind was doing something serious off the lake, the way it does in late winter up here. Like it's trying to finish one last thing before it gives up and turns into spring. Kayla picked up on the second ring. Dad. Hey, kid. You sound different, she said. Different how? I don't know. Less like you're holding something. I looked at the ceiling for a second. I need to tell you some things, I said. About me and your mom. The pause on her end was the kind that meant she'd been waiting. Okay, she said. Your mom and I are separating, officially. It's been in process for a while. The paperwork is almost done. Another pause. I know, she said. You know? Dad! Her voice was patient in a way that reminded me of my own mother. I've known something was wrong for like 2 years. I just didn't know what. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Were you protecting me? Trying to. Dad, she said. I'm 19. I know. I don't need protecting. I need information. I almost smiled. You sound like your grandmother. Good, she said. Grandma knows things. We talked for 40 minutes. The real kind of talk, not the parking lot kind. I told her what I could tell her. I didn't tell her about Dale Fuchs or Roy Gaines. That wasn't my story to give her about her mother. And she was going to have her own relationship with Donna to navigate, without me loading it up with details she couldn't unknow. I told her the marriage had been broken for a while. I told her I had a plan. I told her the house would probably sell, but I'd find a place nearby. Nothing was going to pull me out of Ashtabula. You're not leaving? She said. I'm not leaving. Okay, she said. And something in that single word had more relief in it than I expected. And it cost me something to hear it, but the good kind of cost. The kind that means something matters. I'll be home for spring break, she said. I know. I'll make chili. Make extra, she said. I'm bringing my roommate. She's never had real chili. What kind of chili has she had? The kind from a can. Good Lord, I said. Kayla laughed. A real laugh. I hadn't heard that in a while either. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a bit. Hank had migrated over and put his head in my lap, the way he did when he sensed something shifting. I scratched behind his ears. We're going to be all right, I told him. He wagged once, slow and certain, like he already knew. The next week I got a call from Walt Dillon. He'd heard through the mutual friend network that the settlement was in process. Walt was careful about it. He didn't ask for details. He just said he was sorry it came to this, and that he hoped I knew he was in my corner. I know, I said. I appreciate it. That envelope you gave me, he said. I never opened it. I know you didn't. You trusted me with it. I did. He was quiet for a second. You need anything, Ray, anything at all. I'm good, I said, but thank you. That was Walt. No drama, no performance, just a man picking a side and meaning it. The week before Kayla came home, something happened that I hadn't planned for. I was at the arena on a Thursday evening, running a training session with 3 younger guys I'd been working with. We were going over fundamentals, positioning, timing, how to take a fall without destroying your body over a 20-year career. The stuff nobody wants to learn because it's not glamorous, but it's the stuff that keeps you working. I was demonstrating a hip toss when Benny Marsh came in from the back corridor and gave me a look. Someone in the lot, he said. I knew before I got to the door. Dale Fuchs was leaning against his Ram 1500 in the far corner of the parking lot. Not hiding, not approaching, just standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, waiting. It was the kind of thing a man does when he's worked himself up to something and doesn't want to lose his nerve before he gets there. I told the guys to keep working. I went out. The lot was cold. Overhead lights, a few cars, the sound of the lake somewhere past the buildings. I walked over to Dale and stopped about 6 feet from him. He looked the same as always. Tan for February, which meant a tanning bed somewhere, which was such a Dale Fuchs detail that I almost said something about it. He had his jaw set like he'd rehearsed this. I need to talk to you, he said. Okay, I said. About Donna. Okay. She told me what's happening. The settlement. She's allowed to tell people things, I said. He shifted his weight. I want you to know it wasn't. He stopped, started again. It wasn't what you think. Dale, I said. What do I think? He looked at me. He didn't have an answer for that. Nobody ever does when you ask them to say the thing out loud. I'm not here to fight you, he said. I know you're not, I said. That landed. He blinked. I'm here because... He stopped again. He was having a hard time with this. I let him have it. I'm here because I need you to know I didn't set out to... Dale, I said. He stopped. I don't need your explanation, I said. I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you. We're not friends. We were neighbors. Now we're going to be former neighbors. That's the whole story. He stood there. Go home, I said. He went home. I stood in the cold parking lot for a minute. The lake wind was coming straight down the street, the kind that finds every gap in your jacket. I didn't feel much of anything standing there. Not satisfaction, not anger, just the particular quiet of a thing being finished. I went back inside and finished the training session. Spring break came. Kayla drove up from Kent State on a Friday afternoon in a car that needed new wiper blades, which I noticed immediately and replaced on Saturday morning while she was still asleep, because that's the kind of thing a father does without being asked. Her roommate was a girl named Becca from Columbus, who had, indeed, never had real chili, and ate 2 bowls of it and said it was the best thing she'd ever tasted, which I thought was probably an overstatement, but I appreciated it anyway. Kayla and I had one night alone when Becca went to see a friend in Cleveland. We sat at the kitchen table after dinner with the remains of a pot of coffee between us and talked the way we hadn't talked in a long time. Straight and honest, and without the parking lot filter. She asked me if I was okay. Yeah, I said, I really am. You're not just saying that. I'm not just saying that. She looked at me for a moment. Mom called me, she said. I figured she would. She wanted me to, I don't know. She said she wanted me to understand her side of things. Did you? I said. I listened, Kayla said. That's different. I nodded. She didn't say anything about... Kayla paused. She didn't explain the why, just that things had gotten complicated and you both wanted different things. That's one way to put it, I said. Dad, she looked at me directly. I don't need the details. But I'm not going to pretend I don't know there's more to it. There's more to it, I said. Okay. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I'm not going to stop talking to Mom. She's my mom. I know that, I said. I'd never ask you to. But I'm also not going to pretend things are fine when they're not. That's all I'd want, I said. She nodded once, then she reached across and put her hand on my arm for a second, the same way my mother had at Crestview. And I thought about how those two women were the most straightforward people in my life, and how I had somehow managed not to deserve that. Make more coffee, she said. You've had 3 cups. Make more coffee, Dad. I made more coffee. The settlement finalized in the second week of April. The house went on the market in May. I found a place on the east side of Ashtabula, a rental to start, a solid 2-bedroom on a street with actual trees, the kind of place that needed some work, but nothing I couldn't manage. I took the furniture I'd bought before the marriage, and the furniture Donna had no interest in, which turned out to be most of the comfortable pieces. And I took Hank, and I took the gear from the spare locker at the arena, and I left. The day I moved out, I did it while Donna was at work. Not to be dramatic about it, just because there wasn't anything left to say in person. And standing in a half-empty house, watching each other pretend otherwise, seemed like punishment for its own sake. I did leave one thing on the kitchen counter, the Post-it note from Eddie Boone's table. Don't move until you can't lose. I don't know why I left it. Maybe I thought she'd understand it. Maybe I just didn't want to carry it anymore. I drove the F-150 to the new place with Hank in the passenger seat, his head out the window, ears back, completely unconcerned with the philosophical weight of the moment, which was exactly what I needed. I carried boxes in, set up the kitchen, found the coffee maker. I made coffee and sat on the back step and looked at the yard. It needed work. The fence had a section that was going soft. The grass was whatever it was. There was a tree in the corner that had dropped a big branch over the winter, and nobody had moved it yet. It was mine to fix. That felt fine. A couple weeks later, on a Friday evening, I drove out to Cutter's Ridge. The ice was gone from the dock. Eddie's planks were gray and damp, the lake out past them finally moving again, the color of hammered tin in the late afternoon light. Eddie was already out there with 2 cups of coffee, gas station styrofoam, which was the only kind he kept in the cabin. I sat down next to him on the dock. He handed me a cup. We didn't say anything for a while. The lake did its thing. A heron worked the shallows to the south. Somewhere back in the trees, a woodpecker was doing serious structural damage to something. How'd it go? Eddie said. Clean, I said. He nodded. Ridgeline held up, I said. Settlement came in about where Carla said it would. Good. House sold fast. Didn't have to fight about it. Good. I drank my coffee. It was bad. It was perfect. You sleep? Eddie said. Yeah, I said. First time in a while, but yeah. He nodded again. He was looking out at the water. He had his own history with this kind of thing. The old grief he carried like a stone in his coat pocket. And he never talked about it, and I never asked. And that was the right arrangement for both of us. The thing about this game, he said, is the other person always thinks they're the one who's been playing it. Yeah, I said. They think they know the board. She thought she knew the board, I said. They always do. He sipped his coffee. Right up until they find out you moved the pieces while they weren't watching. I looked at the water for a while. I don't feel like I won something, I said. That's the weird part. I thought I would. You didn't win, Eddie said. You got out even. That's different. Is that enough? He looked at me. Eddie Boone had 68 years of looking at people and knowing what they actually meant. And right now, what he saw in my face must have answered the question before I finished asking it. Yeah, he said. It's enough. We sat there until the light went flat, and the heron gave up on the shallows and the woodpecker finished whatever it was doing. Then we went inside, and Eddie made something on the stove that involved whatever was in the refrigerator, and we ate it at the unfinished wood table and didn't talk about Donna or Dale Fuchs or Roy Gaines or any of it. We talked about the arena. A kid Eddie had heard about coming up out of Cleveland, 18 years old, supposed to have real instincts. Whether the Tuesday card should move to Wednesday, given the spring schedule. Whether Benny Marsh was ready for a longer run at the top of the card. Normal things. The things that were still there. I drove home on Route 20 with the windows down. The lake was somewhere off to the left, invisible in the dark but present the way it always was. That particular weight in the air that meant water and distance. The road was empty. The truck ran clean. I pulled into my new driveway and sat for a minute. Not the crying kind, not the angry kind. Just a man sitting in a truck at the end of a long road, with a dog waiting inside and a fence to fix and a training session on Monday, and a daughter coming home in June. And the particular quiet of a man who did what needed doing and can now, finally, stop. I got out of the truck. I went inside. Hank met me at the door.